Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Dentzel. It was a Thursday. It is a Thursday. It's going to be a Friday. Had a little bit of rain this morning, some thunderstorms. I was looking at the map. You know how you have those, like the green and the yellow and then the orange and then the red? We had this huge glob of red that flew right over Madeira Beach this morning. But it was beautiful before. It was beautiful after. It was really, really weird. I guess that's Florida weather for you, but it's perfect. I love sitting here doing my work. The windows are open. The breeze is blowing through my place. Just got cars going by. People walking out to the beach. Just a perfect time of the year. I'll have you also know that I've told you that my mother has been having some issues. She really had some issues when she was here in Florida for those 3 months. Man, did that time fly. And she's doing a lot better now. She got to see a doctor a couple of days ago up in Pennsylvania, and he spent a lot of time with her. She has a physical therapist coming to the house that's working with her. They're doing some additional blood tests, but I can just tell when I talk to her on the phone that she's a lot more lively than when she was down here. And I think it had to do with some of the medication they might have had her on while she was here. And she's just having some leg problems. Maybe a big deal, maybe a little deal. Just hard to say at this point. But she sounds a lot better. And then, of course, it always helps for my mother when the Pirates win. She's always in a much better mood when the Pittsburgh Pirates win our baseball team. And the Pirates have been doing great. They're 3-0. And that absolutely perks her up as well. So I'm glad to hear that she's doing well. And, of course, my dad's helping her around the house and helping her out of chairs and things like that. And so they're working together to try to make it as comfortable for her until they can find some sort of cure for whatever she has. If there's a cure. If there is. If not, if she just needs to use a walker or whatever, of course, I can live with that. I think my dad can live with that. As long as she's in no pain and she has her mind and she knows what's going on, that's great to me. So let's get to the show. Didn't have a chance to talk about this yesterday, and I'm going to try to stay away from the political stuff, at least I should say the election stuff, for at least the first part of the show. Been following this story about the North Koreans and their insistence that they now have the ability to put a nuclear device on top of a missile and shoot it somewhere, and then that thing explode wherever they want to shoot it, into South Korea, Japan, out into the water. They are now insisting that they have that capability. And you know what's fascinating to me? There's a bunch of different things that are fascinating to me. As I've told you, that anytime that I can watch a documentary about North Korea and what goes on there, I do. It's fascinating to me. I mean, it's disgusting. Don't get me wrong. It's completely disgusting that a country like North Korea still exists. And all of the pain that the leaders of North Korea have caused their people for decades now. And we as the United States and NATO or the United Nations haven't been able to do anything about it. It's all disgusting. But it is, on the other hand, fascinating to me as well because it's such a secret. I guess that's where, I mean, who doesn't like to know secrets, right? So there's that part of it regarding anything that comes up about North Korea and what goes on in that country. But what's also fascinating to me is that here they are in the year 2016, and still they haven't figured out how to put a nuclear weapon on top of a missile and shoot it somewhere and it actually all work. And what's fascinating to me about that is the United States have been able to do that since the 1950s. So for over 60 years, we've had technology that still the North Koreans have not mastered. That should tell you something about them. Should also tell you something about how, despite the espionage that goes on for technology, we know that, for example, China has ripped the United States off in various ways. You look at some of their new military hardware, it looks like exact copies of American military hardware, like the stealth fighter and some other things. That still, that stuff, that information has not made it to North Korea. And we're very fortunate. In fact, that's really the only thing. We're just fortunate that the technology is so difficult to get. And then maybe it's also difficult to even build it from the ground up. That is the only thing that has kept North Korea from having a nuclear weapon that it can shoot somewhere. It's not necessarily been us stopping them. Yes, we had a war with them going back to the 1950s. But otherwise, militarily, we haven't stopped the North Koreans at all. In fact, nobody has stopped the North Koreans' military at all since the 1950s. They've pretty much done whatever they've wanted. They've had incursions into South Korea, trying to kill the president of South Korea. This goes back to, the late 70s, early 80s. They've killed South Korean soldiers, civilians. They sunk a South Korean military ship, how many years ago? 8 years ago, something like that. And they've gotten away with all of it. Yes, there have been sanctions and the suspending of aid and everything else, but nothing that has really damaged the leadership in North Korea at all. We haven't stopped them really from doing what they've wanted at all. Let's just admit that. And the only reason they don't have that nuclear weapon capability yet is because of the difficulty of the technology, not because anything that any one person has done. And I just don't know how long that can continue. I mean, my belief is that they'll eventually, of course, they're saying they have figured it out. Don't know if we can believe them or not, but I think eventually they're going to be telling the truth on that particular topic. That when they say, yes, we can shoot a nuclear missile at Japan, hit our target, it'll explode, killing thousands of people, they're going to mean it at some point. It might not be today or tomorrow or a week from now, but I think eventually they're going to be telling the truth on that. And what are we going to do about it? What are we doing about it? It doesn't seem like that much. And in fact, you could say that what we and other countries have done against Iran over the years it's been a lot more than what we've done against North Korea. Of course, going back how many years ago? 10 years ago, 8 years ago, there was that Stuxnet virus that got into the technology, the computers at these Iran nuclear facilities. Remember that? I think that was a joint American-Israeli operation and completely destroyed their nuclear capabilities and making uranium, the kind of isotopes you need for a bomb, set it back several years. And, of course, then Barack Obama comes along and makes a deal with them that makes it all possible again. But to my knowledge, we haven't done anything like that for North Korea. Now, it may be because, it's a little harder to get within the boundaries of North Korea than it is with Iran. Iran is despite it being a terrible country too, with terrible leadership, it's a little bit more open country than North Korea is. Iranians can actually leave Iran and go places and then come back. North Koreans, they can't do that. They can't do that. Now, the only jets flying into there are people from other countries. There aren't many North Koreans jumping on those jets to leave, because we know if they left North Korea, they'd probably never come back. And the leadership knows it. But this crossing of fingers and hoping that North Korea can't figure this out, it is a dicey proposition. Because, just looking at the technology, with us, we figured out how to build a nuclear bomb in the early 1940s. Figured out something that would work. And there have been many documentaries detailing how we went about doing that. The brightest minds that America could put together got together and built the bomb that was then exploded, and then they figured out, we can use this on Japan. But you look at that bomb and how heavy it was, and you say, well, it's just not in 1940s technology. You could never put that thing on top of a missile and shot it somewhere, on top of a rocket and shot it somewhere. Just too heavy. Just did not have the technology. But within 10 years, we did. Very quickly, we figured that all out. Now, granted, we used a lot of Nazi technology. We used a lot of their scientists. Operation Paperclip, I believe it was called. Some of those scientists went to the Soviet Union. The lucky ones got to go to the United States. Von Braun helped us with all of that. And if you don't know, our entire space program from the late 50s onward was based on Nazi technology. How do you like to live with that? Pretty much. Yes, American had their rocket people like Goddard. But a lot of that technology came from those V-1, V-2 rockets that the Nazis used during World War II. So putting that all together, we were able to figure something out. In the 1950s, before computers, before fuel injection in cars, before cell phones, before the internet, before all of this, and now all these years later, North Korea can't figure it out. Still can't figure it out. We're very, very fortunate. But it is fascinating. It is fascinating. It seems to me they have shrunken some sort of nuclear device down. It may not be what we know as a nuclear device. It may be very, very dirty. I don't know how much TNT power it has, but it's certainly, if it would go off, would kill people and then make that area particularly radioactive for quite a while. Kind of like that bomb that Goldfinger was going to use in the James Bond movie Goldfinger. Not meant to kill a lot of people, but it sure can make things difficult for everybody else. So, I don't know. I guess we'll know if they can do it or not when they actually do it. And that's what you have to worry about. We are so caught up in terrorism, and we should be. We should be, because the terrorists, they could probably get their hands on a nuclear device too. And when I think about that, I think of the Tom Clancy book, The Sum of All Fears. The book was way better than the movie. That could happen. But the North Koreans, I think, are even a little bit more of a wild card in all of this. And God forbid, should the terrorists, the Muslim terrorists, the radical Muslim terrorists, start being friends with the North Koreans. Now, that would be surely, and I know North Korea and Iran maybe have done some dealings, but I'm talking about ISIS in North Korea, Al-Qaeda in North Korea. That would be big trouble. Big trouble. So, and we just have to hope that, I'm guessing that the North Koreans, they don't like terrorism for its own reasons. Of course, we know in a communist country where the leader is seen as a god, that maybe they're not going to do any dealings with a bunch of radical people doing it because of the offshoot of a religion. And it also could be that those terrorists, those ISIS terrorists, they're more they're more interested in maybe taking over North Korea than actually dealing with it. So we'll just have to see. But it's a huge, huge problem. And I just don't know what the fix is. As I've told you before, I think the longer you wait to do something about this, the worse it's going to be. The harder it's going to be to do something that would be correct. That's what my instincts tell me. The truth is, had we done something about North Korea 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it would have been easier than doing it now. It would have been easier 30 years ago than now. It would have been easier 40 years ago than now. So I can't help but think that 20 years from now, if nothing has yet happened, that it's easier to do it now than it would be 20 years from now. I think. Unless there's some plan to topple the leadership in North Korea, which I don't think there is, because China is still not going, I think, ever going to let that happen. And every time this topic comes up, I find myself saying it's weird that the United States and China still haven't been able to get together on something regarding that. Is that China's fault? Is that Barack Obama's fault? I don't know. Because it is a danger to both of our countries. And to Russia's as well. Remember, Russia shares a border with North Korea as well. I know we have differences with Vladimir Putin, and we have big differences with China, and they are suspicious of us, and we're suspicious of them. But North Korea is a problem for all of us. And it's a failure in diplomacy and strategy that North Korea still exists. If North Korea was just some backward country that didn't have this kind of technology, just wanted to be to itself, almost like it is a cult state. But if it was a cult state that just wanted to stick to itself and didn't have any world domination aspirations, then I don't know what you can do. I mean, granted, it would be easier to dismantle a country like that, being that it would probably be as militarily as advanced as North Korea. But you could say, well, if the people want to be there and they like it, what are you going to do? But North Korea this is something different. I'm not saying the people who live there like it there. I'm just not sure how much they know about the outside world. But they have a leadership that is hell-bent on causing chaos. And that's the reason we should be doing something. But let's move on to something else. Have you seen these? Time flies by so fast on this show and in my life. And, of course, I've had a lot of things going on recently, with my mother and going back to Pennsylvania and her being in the hospital for a little bit. And when those things are all going on, it's amazing how fast it seems time flies. I mean, my parents were here for 3 months. It seems like they were here a week. They were here from the end of December to the end of March. It just seems like the snap of the fingers. But I can't remember if I talked about this or not when it started happening. But these travel bans to North Korea, and now with Mississippi and these laws that these states have passed about religious freedom, and then PayPal said it was going to do business, it was going to set up some sort of business in North Carolina, and now it's not. And some of these governors have restricted travel. These Democrat governors, in this particular case, citing this particular story, the governor of New York, Governor Cuomo, is now restricted travel to both Mississippi and North Carolina because of some of the laws that these states have passed. And, of course, when I mean by travel restriction, it just means that the people in government, they're just restricted from going there. There will be no government people on the government dime, on the New York State government dime, who are going to be going to these states anymore, whether for business or whatever else. Now, I can't imagine that means it's a lot of money. I can't imagine that. Okay? And it's not like Governor Cuomo and some of these other governors are restricting trade between. I'm sure that there are products that are made in North Carolina that are still going to New York. And I'm sure that there are private companies in New York who are producing things, whether it's services or products like fruits and vegetables, whatever else, that are shipped to North Carolina and Mississippi. I don't think it's gotten that crazy yet. But I can see a day when that could happen. See, when I see a story like this, now, there's a couple things going on here. First of all, you don't see any Republican governors restricting travel to those states that have made weed legal, have you? Remember, weed is technically still illegal in the United States. Like it, dislike it, smoke it, don't smoke it. The federal law is still that marijuana growing and trafficking is illegal. Now, even though we know that there are some states, Colorado, Oregon, a few others, that have made it legal, and frankly, the feds really haven't done that much about it at all. But we know that there are several governors of other states who don't, and legislatures, who don't want to make weed legal in their states. They believe that's wrong. I happen to think that way as well. But it's not like I'm hearing that any of those governors are saying, well, you know what, we can't send any government officials to Colorado. We can't send any government officials to Oregon. That's because of what they're doing here. In fact, I think that things are still the same way between all these states as they were before. I haven't heard about one travel ban by any state to Colorado and the Alaska and Oregon. I keep bringing those states up. At all. And see, this is a suspicion that I have that the reason that Governor Cuomo has no problems doing what he wants to do with travel restriction, whereas no Republican governor has acted out against Colorado, is because you know why? We as Republicans, we believe in republicanism, small r, and Democrats just don't. They don't. This goes back to a talk I had with you last week about why do states exist? Why isn't the United States of America just America and we're just one big country and Florida doesn't exist, Pennsylvania doesn't exist? It's just when you look at you'd look at America on a map, it wouldn't be divided in 50 sections. It would just be one huge section, along with Hawaii and Alaska still there. But that would just be, it wouldn't be named Alaska. That would just be part of the United States or part of America. The United States part wouldn't even exist. It would just be America. Why do those 50 states exist? Because we're supposed to believe in republicanism. It goes goes also back to states elect presidents, people do not. But I think the reason that you don't hear these Republican governors complaining about Colorado and the rest of these weed states is because they understand that, you know what? In our Republican system, once again, small r, those states can do that. I may not like it as governor of Texas. I may not like it as governor of Louisiana. But you know what? If that's the way they want to run their state, what are you going to do? If the federal government doesn't like it, it's their job to try to figure it all out, not mine. So according to my government principles, I may not like what's going on in that state, but I know that what they did is perfectly within their duty, their constitutional protections, let's put it the way. Even though I personally may not like it. Whereas what you see, I think, in Governor Cuomo's case and some of these other Democrat governors who want to restrict travel or have restricted travel is that they believe that just one law should fit everybody. They think because their state does something a certain way, then every other state in the union should be that exact same way. And in that way, they do not believe in republicanism. They believe in an overarching, huge federal government that is the beginning and end of all laws and protection of rights in the United States. Now, this shouldn't be a surprise because we know how much the Democrats love the federal government. Well, this is just a sign of that. This is just a sign of that. And because Governor Cuomo doesn't like it, and some of these other governments don't like it, they can't put their political ideology aside. They can't put it aside and say, you know what? In our Republican, small r form of government, North Carolina can do that. Mississippi can do that. And all these other states can do that. No, politics jumps into it. Because governor doesn't like it in one state, he's going to do this as some form of protest. And once again, don't laws come first? It's not the whims of men that keep us together. It are the laws of our country that keep us all together. We are not a country of men. We are a country of laws. The laws are supposed to be followed. If you do not like the laws, you have so many opportunities as a regular citizen to change them. Through speaking out, through voting, through running for office, to becoming a lawyer, elections, on and on and on. We have various amount of ways that you can change the laws in this country, but we know what Democrats want. They just want to ban people from doing things. And if they don't like it, well, we're just going to protest. We're going to boycott. Very, very interesting. This is the exact reason, and I think that Governor Cuomo's action, once again, he's not alone, is another reason why the Democrats, they just aren't a big fan, for example, of the 10th Amendment either. That all rights, all privileges that are designated, that aren't designated in the power of the federal government are then disseminated to the states. Says something like that. I'm sorry, I didn't print it out to read it for all of you. But you know what I'm saying. States' rights. Let's just keep it to two words. States' rights. Obviously, Governor Cuomo doesn't believe in that. He believes that another state doesn't do what he likes. He can control his employees on what they can do. Now, does that sound like freedom to you? And once again, I bring up, I don't see any Republican governors boycotting any Democrat states. So it must be more than just him having a bad day, Governor Cuomo. There must be a fundamental difference between how we view what states can do and how what Democrats view as what states are allowed to do, and then how you respond to it. Right? And then it's the federal government's job to work this all out. And I wonder if anybody from the federal government is going to knock on Governor Cuomo's door and say, you know what? We have this thing called republicanism. I know you don't like what's going on in North Carolina, but you know what? You can't do that. We're here. The federal government is here to arbitrate differences between states, and we believe you're wrong. Is anybody in the federal government going to do that? Probably not. Probably not. But there's another part of this that I'm not gonna have time to talk about, but it's the whole issue of travel in the first place. Because it seems to me when a governor his knee-jerk reaction is to do something like this. then it tells me there's also something going on in his mind other than just the concern of people who work in the state government of New York. But I want to get into that after the break. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
Real radio for real Americans. Red State Talk Radio.
This is Brigitte Gabrielle from actforamerica.org. Ladies and gentlemen, if you do not go to bed every night absolutely fatigued from trying to restore America from the destruction that is taking place, then you're simply not working hard enough. Arm yourself with knowledge so that you too can act for America by listening to Red State Talk Radio. Red State Talk Radio, the dominant force in conservative internet talk radio. RedStateTalkRadio.com. Lock it in and rip off the knob.
I can't defend my family because I live in Chicago.
I am free to defend my family with my AR-15 or handgun because I live in Wyoming.
I can't even protect myself if I'm attacked because I live in D.C.
I carry my 9mm in my purse anywhere I go in Texas.
I can't protect my small retail shop here in Brooklyn.
We keep guns behind the counter at our shop in Oklahoma. Only had to show it once.
Do you see a pattern?
Demand equal gun rights in America. Go to SAF.org now.
My name is Courtney Luster. I'm 21, well-educated, and unemployed American. I happen to be black, so I'm in the highest unemployment segment of the population, black youth unemployment. Notice I don't refer to myself as African American because I'm an American first. I'm a proud American who happens to have black skin. So please explain to me where African American fits into that equation. You're right, it doesn't. For over 60 years, the Democrat Party has used my fellow black Americans to maintain power in the federal and state governments. Why do I say that? Because I read history. While many of my friends are watching mindless videos, I choose to listen to Red State Talk Radio. Why? Because I want to educate myself, not entertain myself. Red State Talk Radio, America's premier conservative talk radio network. Hey, all you black American youth, be a Frederick Douglass Republican, not an Al Sharpton race pimp. Educate yourself. Listen to RedStateTalkRadio.com.
This is Michael Cutler, retired senior special agent with the former INS, the Immigration and Naturalization Service. You should know that I'm also a lifelong Democrat, but ladies and gentlemen, the mainstream media has completely failed the American people. That's why, despite being a lifelong Democrat, I listen to Red State Talk Radio, the dominant force in conservative internet talk radio. Lock it in and rip off the knob.
We're back at the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I want to continue to talk about what Governor Cuomo has done regarding travel from New York to North Carolina and Mississippi. And the reason he's doing this is because they've passed some what he would call anti-LGBT laws in both of those states. And we know that there are private companies that have, for example, PayPal, that have said that they're not going to do business in North Carolina because of this. Of course, I found a story somewhere that it's interesting. The PayPal, it won't do business in North Carolina, but it'll do business in the Middle East, where, of course, gays are tortured and hung and things like that. So that reminds me of the Apple issue with them not wanting to open a phone for the FBI, but of course Apple is more than happy to go along with all of the censorship that goes on in a country like China. That kind of stuff drives me nuts, and those companies are not alone. We know Google, Facebook, all of these countries do that kind of thing. They're tough on the federal government of the United States, but dang it, they'll go along with anything that any other government wants to do. Drives me nuts. But regarding the other part I want to mention, and to me this is telling, is that Governor Cuomo's knee-jerk reaction that to ban government travel to these states. See, when I hear something like that, and once again, I have no proof of any of this. It's just a suspicion. It's an expression of what I think I know about human nature. Usually our first reaction to something that happens in our lives, of course, outside of politics or within it, is usually the genuine one. I'm not saying it's the correct one, but it's usually the genuine one. And there's a part of me that when I hear this story, I think, you know what? I bet he'd love to ban private travel too. That's immediately the thought that jumps into my mind after I read a story like this. I know it's only about government travel, people who are on the government dime. But Governor Cuomo has to realize is that that's only a very, very small part of course, the North Carolina economy. I mean, once again, how many people from New York government, state government, really travel to North Carolina? I don't know. Maybe they have some convention they're going to go to, and it was supposed to be scheduled in North Carolina, and now they're going to go to Illinois. I don't know. But it can't add up to very much. However, I do know that Governor Cuomo, among quite a few Democrat governors, especially in the Northeast, know how many of their people are moving from their states. And we know why they're moving. Because of the state, the regulation, the taxes, the horrible business environment. I mean, we notice. I mean, you look at, you can go online and find a population change map in the United States, and you see all of these, the map, people shifting from the Northeast down into the South, into the Southwest. I mean, I was part of that when I moved from Pennsylvania to Nevada. And that's one of the reasons that Nevada in the late 1990s up through the mid to late 2000s grew in population just crazily. The fastest growing state in the Union. Of course, that's kind of slowed down, especially because of the housing bust. But for a while there, Nevada was just going crazy with population, especially southern Nevada. And I was part of that. But I'm sure somewhat where down in places these governors don't like to talk about, these Democrat governors, these liberal governors, they don't like their citizens leaving. They don't like these citizens moving from their state with its high taxation, high regulation, anti-gun, anti-business, anti-entrepreneur, I hate saying that word, to a place where those people can start their own businesses, don't have to pay state income tax, on and on and on. They hate it. Of course, they're not willing to change, but they continue to hate it. And I know they wake up every day wishing they could restrict those people from leaving. There is no doubt in my mind. But they know that that would just be a little too crazy for some people. But I could see them trying it sometime. I could see Governor Cuomo, if he was in office long enough, a couple decades, saying, well, now that we've restricted travel for government people to North Carolina, I think it's about time we start restricting what private people can do now, too. We're not going to allow any flights to go directly from North Carolina to New York. We're not going to allow them to land in Buffalo. We're not going to allow at Newark. We're not going to allow them to land at JFK. We're not going to allow them to land in Syracuse, Rochester, Albany, none of those. If you want to get here, if you want to come to New York, you North Carolina people, you're going to have to go somewhere else. And for all you New York people, if you want to go to North Carolina, you're going to have to go on connecting flights, or you're going to have to drive there, because we're just not going to have them have you going there anymore. In fact, if we find out that you have a vacation planned to North Carolina, you know what? We might just have to take a look at you a little more seriously. We're not sure that we really want to have your kind in our state. And I ask you, as conservatives, can you see that happening? I know you can. Now that I've explained it to you, I know you know that's possible. And in that is how you get to the bottom of liberalism, because that's what it's all about. How these governors, these liberal politicians react to a story like this shows you what they're really thinking down deep. And if Governor Cuomo thought that he could come out and get away with it, he'd love to restrict all travel to North Carolina from his state. And in fact, he'd love to get together with all the other Democrat governors and them all restrict all government and private travel to North Carolina. And whatever those states. Maybe they just want to restrict travel to anywhere else. In fact, maybe they just want to build up walls around their states so nobody can leave. Because you could see a day, if things continue, where some of these states, they're going to be ghost towns. If Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, all of those Northeast states continue on the path that they are on, they will be vacant in 200 years if we can keep this union together. They will be ghost towns. You'll be able to go up to the Northeast and buy several acres of land for $1. All because of liberalism. These liberals, they will continue to get elected there, and they will be the governors of nothing. They'll just be these holdouts, people living off the state dollar, living off food stamps. They'll continue to elect these liberals, and everybody else who's a private citizen who doesn't have to rely on government will move. And there'll be just vast tracts of land. You'll be able to drive your car for miles and see nothing. And if I know that, I'm sure these governors have figured it out as well. It's just they're afraid to do what's right. Why? Because it's against their ideology. All right? They can't readily admit that these people are making the right decision in these people's own personal lives. Because that's not how these people, liberals do not think that way. You're not supposed to do what's best for you. You're supposed to do what's best for the state. Well, what's best for the state would be for all these people to stay in the states where they were born and where they grew up. All those people who moved to Nevada, you got to come back. You got to come back to Connecticut and New York. It's your responsibility to stay here and live under our rule. Right? I'm telling you, that is the way they think. And this story is an expression of that. What do you think the Governor Cuomo would say if somebody came up to him and said, Governor, do you know how many people have moved out of New York since you became governor? I'm going to tell you, I don't even know what that number is. All I know is what I've read, for example, about California, about how over 250,000 Californians moved to Texas. Just one state. One state, over 250,000 Californians moved to Texas in 2013, 2014. To one state. How about how many people moved to Oregon or Nevada or Arizona? Or Colorado or Florida or some place like that. You add up all those numbers up, you know what? You're going to have quite a few people. This is what I think of. So getting back to Governor Cuomo, you know what? We've done this study, and do you know how many people have moved from New York to Florida since you've become governor? What do you think about that, Governor Cuomo? Why do you think that is? And here's what I know. I know what isn't going to come out of his mouth. He's not going to say, you know what? People have their own private property. They can live wherever they want. If they want to move there, that's up to them. It's their money. It's their life. It's their car. It's their house. It's their children. It's their education. They can do what they want. I know that is not going to come out of Governor Cuomo's mouth. What might come out of his mouth is, yes, it's too bad that these people moved from the state where they grew up, and we were hoping they'd stay here and make this state a better state and everything. He's not going to ever come out and say, well, you know, the reason they moved is because our taxes are too high and our regulations too high. He's never going to say that, even though that's the reason that all these people have left. And then people are going to think that his motives behind restricting government travel to North Carolina and Mississippi are pure. And the problem is, it's just not governors who think like that. We have millions and millions of people in this country that think like that. They think that people should stay where they are and suffer under the thumb of government. Why? Because taxes are good. High taxes are good. High regulation is good. Right? The state being up in all of your business is good. You only being able to own a third of an acre of ground is good. That you have to live in a house that is butted right up against another house is good. That you have to do 1 ton of paperwork to start your own business is good. You know where it's not like that? North Carolina. You know where it's not like that? Nevada, Florida, Texas, all these states where people are actually moving. But still, these Democrat governors think they are right. And they're so entrenched, you just can't begin to even figure out how these states are ever going to turn themselves around. That's why I say in 200 years, all that area of the United States may be vacant. Canada may come down and take it all back. Would it be taking it back? I don't know about that. They'd just come down and take it. Let's put it that way. Instead of being 50 states, we'll only be like 43 states. Because everybody else will have moved. And in fact, you could even go as far as to say, you know what? There are a lot of Democrats who are moving from those states as well. Once again, people who are moving, but don't want to totally admit to themselves why they are. They love big government. They love high taxation. They love minimum wages. High minimum wages, or just minimum wages, period, are horrible. But they love that $15 an hour thing. But you know what? When it starts to cramp their style, it's amazing how they can suddenly find somewhere else to move to that is different than their values. And then what do? They go to this other state. They get all their freedom back. And you know what they start doing? They start trying to turn that other state into the state they just left. Right? I think so. It is all so messed up. And I go back to the point, you don't hear about any Republican governors restricting travel anywhere, do you? As ticked off as those governors are around Colorado, the governors of Utah, Nebraska, or is it not? No, Kansas, Wyoming, those governors, those Republican governors of those states, you don't hear them restricting travel to Colorado. In fact, what's their complaint? Their complaint is that Colorado isn't taking care of their own business. The Colorado citizens driving high into these other states. That's most of the complaints you hear. It's not that these other states are restricting travel to people into Colorado. It's the opposite. It's that Colorado can't take care of its own business. Something it started on its own. It's just a fundamental difference between us and them. There just is. Once again, despite we as conservatives and the problems we have with liberalism, you know what? And with all the liberal businessmen who are out there, we still do business with them. We are not the ideology of boycotts. They are. They don't like Chick-fil-A, they boycott it. They don't like Hobby Lobby, they boycott it. Meanwhile, there are tons of conservatives who have iPhones, even though Apple is not a conservative company. They probably do business with all sorts of Warren Buffett's companies, even and work for his companies, even though he's not a conservative. On and on and on. Look at Progressive Insurance. I have Progressive Insurance. The guy who started that, not a conservative. I'm sure a lot of conservatives have Progressive car insurance. Don't really care. We don't do boycotts. They do. So it's just such a fascinating thing. I know it's just like one story, and it's a bizarre story, but I think that it shows an underlying belief among liberals. An underlying belief that if they could get away with it, they would. And they'd restrict private travel as well. I want to move on to one more thing before I go. And it has to do with Donald Trump. And I've avoided talking about him this whole show, and it's been kind of nice. But it seems to me that there is some sort of split that is coming among Trump supporters. There's like the Newt Gingrich, Bill Bennett people who, and you can see them out there on Twitter and interviews that they've done, that, saying that Donald Trump has to become a statesman. He has to start talking about policy. And I've read that allegedly Donald Trump is going to start getting a lot more explicit about what his policies are. We'll see. But you have that group out there saying that Donald Trump needs to tone it down. He needs to become more presidential, more statesman-like, softer tone, being that he's leading, and if he wants to get this nomination on and on and on. And then you have all of these other people who kind of like him for all of that other stuff. They like him for being a thug. They like it that his campaign manager is throwing women around. They like it how he talks about women in derogatory terms. They love it. And it's kind of it's going to be interesting to see which way Donald Trump tends to go. I think he's going to continue to go down the thug route. I think that he might flirt with the statesman trail, but I don't think he has that in him. I just don't. It is contrary to his nature, contrary to who he is as a person. And I think those statesman people who want him to become a little more modest, they're going to be greatly let down. But it also shows that those people don't understand who he is. There's another part to this, and another point I want to make about all of this. The real danger with Donald Trump to me is that he thinks that he is always the smartest person in the room. He thinks that he has everything already figured out. He cannot even contemplate an idea that somebody is doing better than he is or was working harder. And that's why I think that you see him state so many times about Ted Cruz and what he said about other candidates when they were still involved. Well, if they're doing better than his, it must be because they're cheating. Because he cannot even fathom the idea that, you know what, there may be other people out there who know more than he does, who work harder than he does, aren't as lazy as he is, actually have followed the rules, have looked into what it takes to actually get delegates. That just does not even enter Donald Trump's mind because he thinks he is the greatest person to ever live. And that would be the danger if he was president as well. This arrogance that he's the smartest, he knows everything, he works hardest, when there's, you know what? There's a lot of hard workers all over the world, and a lot of them want to bring down the United States. That's the danger of Donald Trump. But I got to go. You can go to edwarddentzel.com to find all of my old Red State Talk radio shows. You can also find them at SoundCloud, Podbean, Podomatic, and YouTube. edwarddentzel.com/book is where you can download the first chapter of my next novel, The Comebacks. Follow me on Twitter, Dentzel Domain. Email me, edwarddentzel@reagan.com. You can also find me at Facebook and LinkedIn. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.